Okay, so I hope I didn't take too long getting back to you. It was fairly simple. I just completely forgot how to do this process. So this would just be with using boolean modifiers to sort of apply the cuts by adding invisible rectangles and using expressions to sort of control their movement, or you can just animate them. I'll get into that in a second. So I went and got this FBX of a little animated dancing guy. The first thing you're going to want to do is add a cube mesh and scale it down along the Z so that it's taking out the area that you want to cut out. Then you're going to want to hit Control A and apply the rotation and the scale, because if you don't apply them like this, the modifiers you add later won't recognize the changes you've made to the shape. So in the top right here, you can see this little sort of bookmark symbol with a little drop down. In your scene collection, you probably won't have all these little camera icons on the far right. What you're going to want to do is go into there and highlight the camera icon. These are the controls for the visibilities of the different meshes. If the eyeball is toggled, that means you can see it in the viewport. If the camera is toggled, that means the render camera will be able to see it later on. So for the cube that you just created, make sure that the camera and the eyeball icons are not toggled so that they are both invisible, so that it's invisible. So when you go into the modifier menu, which is this little blue wrench on the right here, you'll see that there's already a armature modifier, which came in with your mesh. And obviously then you're going to want to go in here and add a boolean modifier. Make sure it is set to difference. Make sure that self is selected. Then go into object and select the cube that you just created. And you can see here that it is cutting through the object, but it is also filling in that object with a cap. I know that you said that you initially kind of wanted that, but this can cause issues with the texture, particularly if you've got like an image texture and not just a solid color like I have here, where it just sort of randomly samples the UVs from different points and creates a big ugly mess. So to create a hollow body that you can sort of see inside of and see the sort of inside from the other side, if that makes sense, you're going to want to add a solidify modifier from the list. And make sure that the boolean modifier is on the bottom of the stack, solidify is above it, armature is at the top. It matters what order they're in because it works through the modifiers top down. So in the settings for solidify, make sure the thickness is a tiny value, like put 5 zeros after the decimal point, but make sure that it doesn't round it down to 0. And make sure that even thickness is selected. Setting the thickness to a tiny value can help avoid really jagged, pointy geometry sort of popping out along the edges. If you do have still problems with the geometry, you can try setting the mode to complex and then messing around with the settings in there to get rid of sort of the funkiness, but for the most part, I think simple will probably work. So another issue you can run into is that if there is not enough polygons on the mesh along where it's being cut, you'll get these sort of hard, jagged edges perpendicular to the cut line. And a way you can sort of get rid of that is add another modifier called subdivision surface. Add that under armature but above solidify. And you can normally use the default values, but if you still see more jaggedness in the shadows than you would like, you can just turn those numbers up. But overall, the order of the modifiers should be armature, subdivision surface, solidify, then boolean. So I'm just going to go ahead and add that same stack of modifiers to the hand mesh because that mesh was separate when I installed this for some reason. You can more clearly see here the sort of issue I was talking about with the subdivision surface, where if you don't add it, there's a sort of jaggedness to the shadows on the edges. So now that I've sort of gotten into how to cut out the rectangle from the shape, in terms of adding animation to that rectangle, so that the cut sort of moves up and down the object, I'm going to just make it visible again in the viewport, and go into the tab at the top right here, that's just left of scene collection, so that instead of active tools menu, you're seeing the transform drop down. So I don't know exactly how Cinema 4D is adding that randomized transform to the rectangle. If that is like an expression or something that you could bring over. If it's not, you can always just animate it the old-fashioned way by, using this gizmo on the left here, dragging it up and down along the z-axis. You can set keyframes. Along the bottom of the screen here is the timeline. So, just set it to 0, and you can set a keyframe by selecting the object, hitting I, and then hitting location in this case. And that'll record a keyframe for that location. And you can see in the transform drop-down, the location changes color to show that there's keyframes added. If you didn't want to do this manually, you can add expressions to sort of drive the movement. So in this case, what you would want to do is go into the drop-down, under location, under the Z position, you can right-click and select add driver. And then under expression, you can add any kind of Python expression to control the movement. Okay, so I'm going to go into expression, and I'm going to do the sin of the frame divided by 8. Frame, in this case, is the Blender expression for time, plus sin of noise.random times 12. And that'll give me something. Yeah, okay, that's something. You might want to, add a smoother expression, maybe. Oh, that's the cops. So, hopefully one of those ways is useful. Hopefully any of this is useful. Sorry if I completely misunderstood what you needed here. Good luck, I guess. I recorded, 2 previous versions of this, and the audio was completely unusable, so that was fun. Good luck. Have fun. Oh god.